Well, after previously sitting down and reviewing full Fathom 5, I've decided to return to the worlds of Unbound Doctor Who and take a look at yet another rather highly regarded adventure from this early Big Finish series. In today's review, Deadline, as written by Rob Shearman, featuring Sir Derek Jacobi as Martin Bannister. This release is available to order now on the Big Finish website and has been available since 2003. It is now out of print on physical CD, however you can still purchase it via digital download for around £2.99, which is an absolute bargain, and it can also be purchased in a bundle alongside the other Unbound releases. As always with the Unbound series, all of these adventures are 100% standalone. They all do very different things, as I have found out across listening to these releases, meaning you can essentially pick and choose whatever stories interest you. This release is in fact the 5th in the range, and it was the second one that I listened to in this little Unbound binge that I'm currently going on, having previously listened to full Fathom 5, and frankly it left me wanting to listen to more because it was brilliant. Doctor Who is a TV show produced by Verity Lambert, created by Sydney Newman, and written by Martin Bannister. In fact, Doctor Who never aired on TV. It was axed before the first episode was even broadcast, and Martin Bannister moved on in the BBC to write for Juliet Bravo. Saturday nights at 5 PM will never be the same again. Once more, the Unbound series delivers another frankly bizarre fourth-wall-breaking narrative, with none other than the familiar voice of Sir Derek Jacobi at the helm, as Doctor Who. Or not quite. Of course, in recent years, Sir Derek Jacobi has been the absolutely excellent War Master at Big Finish, who did of course originally appear in the Doctor Who series 3 story Utopia. I absolutely love the War Master series, and if you've not checked out that as of yet, I highly recommend doing so. But within this story, he's playing a very different character, and very well at that. As per, this story throws the rulebook for Doctor Who completely out of the window, creating a story which is very different to your usual Doctor Who serial. For some reason, it actually reminded me of the BBC drama Inside Number 9, allowing the listener to get a glimpse inside people's lives, knowing all you need to know to create a setting packed to the brim with vulnerable characters, a family ruined by its past, and its continued effect on the present. Deadline immediately drew me in as a listener, and I continued to be hooked for its entirety. Due to this story being a very early Big Finish release, and much like the darkness of full Fathom 5, this story will not be suitable for younger listeners. It continues to include darker themes, strong language, and violence towards others, both mentally and physically. Robert Shearman is of course a very well-known name when it comes to Doctor Who, penning some of its best adventures to date, from Jubilee, Dalek and the Holy Terror. I was incredibly excited to experience a new story from him, having avoided this range for some unknown reason for quite a long time. I suppose that is one of the many joys of Big Finish, because the catalogue is simply so large there will always be something to listen to. I love the way that this story is designed. The music and sound design, both by Nicholas Briggs, have a very surreal effect, blending the life of Martin Bannister in the care home and the very distant worlds of time and space. The original Doctor Who theme haunts this story's music score, very much like how the show's concepts haunt the mind of Martin Bannister. We see a reimagining of the original TARDIS team, in particular exploring the relationship between the Doctor and Susan. I love the way its story explores the relationship between the writer and its creation, and how obsessed the mind could perhaps become over time with the creation, and how perhaps all of the things within that person's life can merge into one. And before you know it, that boundary between fiction and non-fiction simply doesn't exist. What I will also say is we do get references to Ian and Barbara within this story, but not in the way that you would expect, because naturally this is an Unbound episode of Doctor Who, and nothing is quite the same. The traumatic family life within this story, I can't lie, I found incredibly bleak. Shearman doesn't shy away from the effects that Martin Bannister's behaviour has had on his son Philip, in his desperate attempt to not make the same mistakes with his son. It's this gritty, heart-tugging, hard-hitting level of emotion which allows Shearman's writing to hit that higher level of immersive realism. His book, Everyone is Just So Special, is a perfect presentation of this. Although I read this book quite a long time ago, many of its stories remain vivid within my mind. Jacqueline King is absolutely excellent as Barbara. I won't really go too much into the character, but I will say, a little bit of a spoiler ahead, is that she kind of acts as the carer within the care home for Martin Bannister. And as a result, we do have this rather unusual relationship between them. I did feel quite uncomfortable actually listening to them because there was an unusual power play going on. In some scenes, you felt like Barbara kind of had the upper hand, and then in other scenes, you felt like perhaps Martin Bannister was onto something or doing something that was perhaps manipulating Barbara. It was very to and from. I didn't quite know what to expect as a listener moving forward, but as a result it really did intrigue me, especially as we added to this story. Each scene kind of took it to a different level, and by the very end of the story, again, it delivered some rather uncomfortable scenes, but excellently acted by the main protagonists. The really interesting thing with Deadline is that I feel it works so well as a standalone story. It gives you all you need to know to create a fully formed story that doesn't need expanding upon. With the David Warner Doctor or the David Collins Doctor, I was left really wanting to hear more from these incarnations, not because the stories are incomplete, but simply because they serve as rather effective pilot stories to lead on to a much bigger adventure. With Jacobi's take on the role, it's a rather well-rounded story that leads to closure. Deadline showcases a very human Doctor, but it also is rather unusual, kind of referring to him as the Doctor, and for those of you that have listened to this story, you will probably know what I mean. He is kind of a human with the adventures of the Doctor deep within his mind. Jacobi's performance is authentic and actually quite troubled. An ageing man looking back on old times, both with positive and negative implications. Peter Forbes is also superb in support. We only get small glimpses into his life as the son of Martin Bannister, beyond his father's care home, but the story goes so much deeper than that. We see a progression of time within this story and within the characters. There is definitely a change again within the dynamic. In a way, Philip's desperation not to be his father matches the desperation of Martin to be on that adventure in the TARDIS without even realising it. The ending is once more bleak, hard-hitting, and rather sad. Since we are also fourth wall breaking, Deadline cleverly ties in the response of fans to a TV show and how dedicated they can become. Martin is approached by a fan of Juliet Bravo to do an interview for its magazine about the episodes that he has written back in the day. The interview takes a rather vicious turn, and it feels weird discussing fan reception in what is in itself a review. Let's face it, my sad self is sat here spending time talking into this microphone about a story because I've enjoyed it and I want to review it for the internet. Why? Because it's a TV show that I enjoy. But given that this story was released in 2003, it's interesting looking back at this episode with the context of 2022, especially given that the community is in a rather unusual time. How the community these days has changed quite a lot. It kind of put into perspective why perhaps I'm not as involved in it as I once was, because normally I review things and then leave and go and do my own thing. More often than not recently, I'm enjoying Doctor Who, I'm listening to audio dramas, but then at the same time I'm doing other things. I am reading books from different writers, I am studying and doing all sorts of different stuff. My life isn't as revolved around Doctor Who as it once was, and I think that this episode, personally for me, kind of made me think about that and the relationship with the fan and the actual show itself, and how perhaps sometimes people can take it to the extreme, at least in my own opinion. For fans of 60s Doctor Who, I imagine this one will be an interesting listen. It plays with the style of a 60s Doctor Who story, whilst treading a fine line between traditional classic Doctor Who and something completely different, because the thing with the Unbound series is it's very unpredictable. Both Deadline and Full Fathom 5 are very human-focused stories. I love how Deadline approaches emotions and mentality in such a careful manner, making for another very unique addition to the worlds of Doctor Who, and continue to showcase why Doctor Who is very lucky to have the likes of Rob Shearman writing for it. So there we have it, that is another Doctor Who Unbound Adventures review, this time of Deadline, featuring Sir Derek Jacobi. And this episode was another excellent one, I really did enjoy it. I am actually recording this review some weeks after having listened to the actual episode for the first ever time, and it is still remaining very vivid in my mind. And I think especially recently, going back and taking a look at these Unbound stories is very interesting for me as a listener, because this is without a doubt some of Big Finish's most bold content, and in 2022 we have seen the return of the Unbound series, but under a very different context, and it has been quite interesting going back to take a look at these Doctor Who stories, because not only am I enjoying them because they are so different, but equally at the same time it's making me reflect on the position of Doctor Who in my own mind as a Doctor Who fan, and how perhaps my life has kind of changed, and perhaps, yes, I've moved beyond it a little bit, but I'm kind of okay with that. So there we have it. Thank you very much for watching this review. I really hope you have enjoyed it. As I mentioned within the review of Full Fathom 5, this isn't like a dedicated series of reviews or anything like that. I'm simply recording these reviews as I listen to them. And who knows, I might decide to review the whole series, I might decide to review only a few. I've already listened to Sympathy for the Devil, so no doubt a review of that will be coming at some point in the future. Returning to the David Warner portrayal of the Doctor, which I was rather excited to return back to, having now had the context of the Bernie Summerfield adventures. But yes, I shall be talking about that in another video, which no doubt will be coming soon, or who knows, it might even be up already. So thanks for watching, and I shall see you all next time.